Happy November, everyone. We are entering the holiday season, and just a couple of days ago on Friday, our community celebrated a very special holiday called True Children's Day. Today, I wanted to share about the significance of this holiday, what it means to be a true child, and a little bit about how God must feel as a parent to humanity. Let's start with the reading from Father Moon. After God created all things in heaven and on earth, he was to have welcomed Children's Day, centering on Adam and Eve. However, because the human ancestors fell, ever since the time of Adam, not even one person has entered the glorious state. The purpose of history has been to restore humankind or to save humankind by placing them in the original position where they were at the beginning. Children's Day is when we children, for the first time in history, abide in the state where we can participate in his glory. So what Father Moon is saying here is that God really wanted to celebrate with his children, his first children, Adam and Eve, at the very beginning of history, biblical history. Unfortunately, they disconnected from God by disobeying the first commandment and falling prey to self-centered, immature sexual love. So God has been longing throughout history to restore humanity back to their original position as true sons and daughters of God. And that's what this holiday is about. Children's Day is a holiday that celebrates the restoration of humanity back to the original position as children of God. So let's read some more. Children's Day is the greatest among the holy days. It is greater than Parents' Day because it is the day for parents to recover their authority. So Father Moon is saying that this day, this holiday, is the greatest holiday for humanity. And interestingly, he says that even it's greater than a holiday called Parents' Day, where we celebrate parents. And the point he makes here is that because it's through children that parents are able to recover their authority. So it's a very interesting point here. Parents can't be parents without children. So even God can't be God the parent without children who attend him. Let's continue. This day is not only for Unification Church members, it is a day for all people of the world to mark and celebrate forever and ever. Children's Day is indeed the most blessed day for fallen humankind. So again, Father Moon really emphasizes this holiday as really a special day for humanity, a day to rejoice, in one sense, for God to rejoice, having children restored to that original position. Let's continue. You especially need to commemorate this day starting within your own family environment. You need to make preparations so that your children naturally will eagerly await the coming of Children's Day, even counting the days off on their fingers and rejoicing when the day is near. So Children's Day is meant to be like Christmas, where the kids are excited for gifts, or another holiday that might be similar is Chinese New Year. I know that they have a tradition where all children receive a red envelope with money in it as a gift. So kind of like that, Children's Day, we need to celebrate it in a way where it becomes a memory for children, that it is meant to be a really joyful holiday. When I was growing up, I remember traveling to Belvedere Church in New York, in Westchester, and they would have this holiday, and there would be this huge table piled with fruits and snacks and different things like that, all stacked up. And I remember once the event or the service ended, they would give out all of the fruits and the snacks to the children, and not just the children, but everyone, but including the children. So yeah, I think it's a really nice holiday. I know we didn't really do much this past Friday. I guess it's still possible to do something today. So I just want to encourage everyone to take advantage of this holiday and really use it to celebrate well with your family. So the Children's Day is a really nice holiday to celebrate with our children and to remember the importance of being children of God. And it made me think, how can we be children of God? So it's nice to celebrate this holiday, but how can we actually live up to or strive to be these children of God? So let's read from a message that both Father and Mother Moon shared on this topic. How shall we live to become children of God, people whom God delights to call my son or my daughter? We must emulate the ideal beginning point of God's creative process. We must emulate the ideal beginning point of God's creative process. Therefore, to become God's children, our first responsibility is to resemble God. We need to embody true love. The way to embody true love begins by living as a filial child, then a patriot, a saint, and finally a divine son or daughter of God. Okay, so there are some really valuable nuggets of wisdom being shared here. Let's break it down into several steps. The first step, I believe, that they shared was that if you want to become children of God, we should first practice on our parents, practice this filial heart to our own parents. So one way of doing that is by showing respect and honor. There are many cultures around the world that have traditions in place that do that. For example, I know in Korean culture, it's very much in the language even, that when you're speaking to your elders or your parents, there's an honorific language that you need to use, which is different than when you're speaking with your peers. Another tradition I remember, I was visiting a Filipino family, and one tradition, the daughter came home, and as soon as she got home, she went up to her dad and kind of took his hand and placed it on her forehead and kind of bowed at the same time as a sign of really respect and letting the father know that she was back home. And I thought it was really beautiful to see that kind of culture of respect in the family. And I know many other cultures, including the Hispanic community and many other cultures, have this kind of really family-centered culture of respect towards your parents. Part of filial piety in growing up as a child, how to practice that, also involves doing things that you may not necessarily want to do, but as a child you do because your parents asked you to. I remember one of the things that in my family we used to do was on Sunday mornings, there would be an early morning kind of a family devotional at 5 a.m. And my parents would get all of us up, and it wouldn't be just like get up and, do your prayer and things like that, but we would have to all change into our Sunday best and do this kind of, a devotional. And I remember it was really difficult to get up, but because my parents asked us to, we did it. We had to, but that's part of, I think, our practice of filial piety is listening to our parents and following certain traditions to help us grow this kind of heart of duty towards our parents. One other example I want to share here is, this is a very common experience, I'm sure, for many children, but I remember distinctly wanting to do well in school to make my parents proud. This was something I remember from a young age, like actually at report card day, my parents would line us up and have each of us kind of report. And I remember feeling excited to be able to report how I did that semester to my parents. And one time, it was the summer of my junior year. There's a kind of a standard at home where my mom would always say, you must do study and homework in the mornings, and then if you're done, you can go out and play. And so I remember my friends called me out to play and it was morning, but I knew I had to, study and prepare for my SATs. So instead, I stayed home and, I did my studies. I remember it was very difficult to make that choice, but fortunately, that helped me, and I did well on the SATs that year. Anyway, the point is, sometimes it's difficult to practice filial piety, but it's important to listen to your parents, practice listening to your parents to develop this heart of, for the sake of bringing joy, for the sake of listening and obeying your parents, that you're actually cultivating this heart of filial piety ultimately towards God as a parent. Because sometimes God asks you to do things that you may not want to do. But by practicing this kind of spirit of duty and obedience, and also a desire to bring joy to your parents, you're practicing this heart of filial piety. Another way that we can learn and practice filial heart is through observing those and practicing it with spiritual leaders or mentors. Some examples come to mind, like the disciples of Jesus. Imagine going back 2,000 years, how it must have been like. It probably wasn't easy. They had to leave their work. They might have been fishing or whatnot, and just like, follow me. And then they had to kind of leave that, and possibly even their families, to follow and support Jesus at that time. And the early disciples of Father and Mother Moon, they had to do a similar level of sacrifice. Many of them, straight out of high school or college, they sacrificed their career and even their families to follow Father and Mother Moon in this kind of providential course. Now, later, as the movement matured, Father and Mother Moon guided our families to strengthen their ties in their own family and to build their tribal influence. One time, Mother Moon, this was back in 2013, she called me to a new mission as the CART president. And it was a very difficult time in our movement. So I may have shared this before, but it was really, let's just say it wasn't the best career move to take on that mission at that time. But I remember being there over breakfast, listening to her, and she was really determined. Father Moon had just passed away the year before, and she was determined to take responsibility for our global community. And she knew that in order for us to succeed, that the next generation leadership in college, led by CARP, which is the Collegiate Association for the Research of Principles, needed to be strong, needed to be revived and healthy. And so she tasked me with that mission. I remember I didn't really want to do it, but at that time, I felt her absolute determination to respond to God, and also to her husband, and wanting to continue his legacy. And so I couldn't, it was one of those, offers you couldn't refuse kind of feeling. But why do we, including disciples of Jesus, the disciples of Father and Mother Moon, myself, why would we continue and say yes, despite the difficulty? I can't speak for them, but from my own experience, I can share that, I felt God's love through them. I felt God's desperation through them, and was moved by their devotion to God. And I think that was the same for Jesus's disciples, and even Father Moon's early disciples, is they felt that kind of their heart for God. And so they decided to sacrifice everything else to follow, to continue God's will. So from this experience, I can say, one way to develop this kind of filial heart towards God is to practice listening to God's guidance through your pastor or spiritual mentor. Again, it's not easy. It's not meant to be easy. Same thing with listening to your parents. It's not easy, right? And it doesn't mean blind obedience. It means, even if you may not feel like doing it at the moment, like cleaning your room or vacuuming the house or whatnot, to really respond to the request. And as you mature, it's not just out of a sense of duty, like I have to do it, but more a desire, a genuine desire to bring joy to them. And if you do this by practicing on your parents, on your spiritual mentors, you will be cultivating this heart that you're going to need in order to attend God as a parent. So that's really the final step on the foundation of practicing filial piety towards your parents and your spiritual mentors. You can continue to grow your filial heart towards God. Now, how do we do that? Let's read. This is from Romans chapter 8, verse 17. Now, if we are children, then we are heirs, heirs of God and co-heirs with Christ, if indeed we share in his sufferings, in order that we may also share in his glory. So this is an interesting verse. I kind of, when I came across it, it surprised me. Despite the common understanding that God is not affected by human dealings and what's happening here on earth, we can see here that to really share in his glory, we must also share in his sufferings as well. God actually suffers. Who knew? And what does it mean to share his suffering? Let's take a look. Jesus, this is from Father Moon, talking about Jesus's experience. So let's read. Jesus, who felt such pangs of indignation in his heart, knew that God was deeply concerned about his situation. This is Father Moon is referring to the time around when Jesus was praying at the Garden of Gethsemane. This is why he tried to suppress any expression of such feelings and demonstrated the utmost filial piety towards heaven. When we reflect upon Jesus, we can understand that he felt the heart of God. When Jesus prayed at the Garden of Gethsemane, he asked God, "Let this cup pass from me, not as I will, but as thou wilt." So it shows that Jesus was concerned about God and God's will more than his own life. He knew that he may have to go the way of the cross and be crucified, but he was concerned, not as I will, but as thou wilt. So Jesus was willing to even die if that was necessary to save humanity. It's really an amazing heart that he had. Father and Mother Moon also went through a similar kind of experience where Father, Jesus visited Father Moon on the mountain when he was praying at night at the age 15 and asked for Father Moon to inherit this mission and continue it to build the kingdom. Father Moon knew how difficult that would be, and twice he declined. He said, "No, this is way more than I can handle. I don't know what I could do to continue your mission." But he realized that God was asking through Jesus and that Jesus was asking for his help. So he responded. He said yes. And why did he say yes? Because he had this filial heart towards God. Filial heart that if God is asking him to do something, he's going to do his very best to respond. Same thing with Mother. In 1960, at a young age of 17, Mother Moon accepted her role as Father's bride and took the responsibility as the Mother of Peace. Why did she do that? Because she felt God's heart. She felt like, this is what God is asking me to do. I will absolutely obey and do my very best to fulfill this mission, this calling that God is asking for. So I think the common thread here between Jesus, Father, and Mother Moon is that they responded to these difficult requests because they understood God's heart. They understood why God was asking them to go through such a difficult course. So I think it's important at this time to take a deeper look at God's heart as a parent. This was the heart that Jesus understood, that Father Moon understood, Mother Moon understood, and that's what allowed them to take on such a big mission and responsibility. So for us to really be able to have this heart of filial piety towards God, it's important to understand what is God's heart like. So let's take a look. After the fall, even though human beings betrayed him so many thousands of times, because God considered them his children, he did not hesitate to do any difficult work. A parent cannot abandon a child just because he is committing sins. Even if human beings were to abandon God, God cannot cut off this relationship and abandon people. This is such a powerful passage. Father Moon is saying here that a parent cannot abandon a child just because he is committing sins. And that's the situation with God. God loves us as a parent and thus cannot abandon us. Even though we continue to make mistakes, we continue to pain God's heart, God cannot abandon us because God is our parent. Let's continue. God is an infinitely sad person. With whom will God share his heart? To whom will God reveal his pain and bitterness? God yearns for sons and daughters to appear on the earth, sons and daughters who can cling to God's sorrow and pain and comfort him. This is the highest standard we should aspire to. So this is really one thing that makes our community different, I think, is that Father Moon reveals this aspect of a sorrowful God, not an almighty God that is indifferent or separate or distant from us, but a God who is right there with each of us, understanding and connecting with the suffering that we all go through, and who's yearning to connect with each of us to understand his heart, the sorrow, the pain that God went through, and to really connect in heart as a parent and child would. That's the kind of God that Father and Mother Moon reveal to us through their own experience. This last passage is more kind of bright. I like to end on a brighter note. So you should form families that God will miss and yearn to return to after he has been away. You should raise families to which he can come freely as a parent visiting his children. This is what it means to live in service to God. So God is longing to be with our families, just as how parents or grandparents feel when visiting their children, right? So understanding that, yes, there's a lot of pain and suffering, just knowing all the suffering that's going on in the world, but to give a little bit of respite or joy to God, it's really about creating an environment in our own families where God can really feel welcome. So we are at the point of the secret of the day, the secret of the week. And the question is, what is the secret to being God's children? I've already kind of mentioned it here and there, but I want to go back to a few tips. Number one, I love this verse, Matthew chapter 5, verse 9. Blessed are the peacemakers, for they will be called children of God. So that's a pretty big clue there. If you want to be children of God, be peacemakers. Okay, let's look at another verse, Matthew chapter 22, verse 37 to 39. Love the Lord your God with all your heart and with all your soul and with all your mind. This is the first and greatest commandment. And the second is like it. Love your neighbor as yourself. So to be children of God, not only should you be peacemakers, but we should love God and love others. So we got peacemaker, love God, love others. These are some key tips. Let's read one more. How shall we live to become children of God, people whom God delights to call my son or my daughter? We must emulate the ideal beginning point of God's creative process. We must emulate, that's a repeat there. Therefore, to become God's children, our first responsibility is to resemble God. So really the secret to being God's children is to simply resemble God. God is a peacemaker, and hence, when we become peacemakers, we resemble God. You know, when we love others, we resemble God. So in order to be children of God, let us be peacemakers. Let us love others, and let us practice God's nature, his attitude, his heart. Then God will be proud of us and experience joy as a parent. You know, one simple example I was reflecting on recently was, when my son did well on his SATs, I felt so proud, because I remember studying hard when I was his age. Or when my daughter decided to cook dinner for us. It brought us tremendous joy, not only because, she was serving us, but because she was really resembling us. So similarly for God, the more we behave like God and resemble God, the more we become like children of God. So in summary, Children's Day is the greatest holiday. So let's definitely celebrate that. Secondly, to be children of God, we must practice filial piety to our parents, to our spiritual mentors, and ultimately practice it directly with God. And third, God has a heart of a suffering parent and is longing for a reunion. So really, that is the state of God's heart. And as true children of God, if we understand that, we should strive to bring any opportunity of bringing joy to God is what we should be doing. So in conclusion, Children's Day is truly a special holiday. I hope you're able to gain some insight into the significance of this day. Also learn a few points on how we can continue to develop our hearts as children of God. So let's strive to comfort him by appreciating God, by sharing God's love to others, and ultimately by resembling God and his divine nature. May God be with you and your family this week. Thank you, everyone.